You're listening to Health Courage Collective Podcast, episode 90. What does metabolic health even mean? Welcome to the Health Courage Collective Podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, and welcome to another episode. Thank you for being here and for being so awesome. I hope all is well with you and that you're having a great day so far. How's your vocabulary? Not just the words you know, but have you made connections about how the words you select to describe your experience co-create your reality? You can have a bigger, richer life just by being more observant of nuances and upgrading your descriptions. Pretty cool. Today, we're going to talk about what metabolic health even means. Depending on what other info you read or listen to, you probably hear that term, maybe a lot. Metabolism, metabolic health, metabolic disease, maybe even metabolic flexibility if you're really on top of it. But can you give a clear, concise definition of what exactly that means or why it matters? Will your ability to define that term make a difference to your ability to live more years in good health in the future? Maybe not, but your actual metabolic health absolutely matters if you want future you to be resilient, strong, and hard to weaken or kill. The first time I heard the term metabolism, I was a kid, and people would commonly say things like, "Oh, she has a slow metabolism," about someone who was heavier, or "He just has a fast metabolism," about someone who was thin but also ate a lot. Like everything else I heard about, like heart attacks or arthritis or dementia, I thought it was just an unlucky something that could befall you at any random time. There certainly are things that can come out of the blue, and people are definitely genetically different, but that wasn't a great definition. Then we hear about metabolic disease or metabolic syndrome, being metabolically unhealthy. I think we know it has to do with food, but what exactly are we talking about here? I could definitely be wrong, but I feel like it's a term that more functional and integrative type practitioners hide behind a little bit. They're awesome and smart and they're not wrong, but it's just not clearly spelled out in my opinion. There's all kinds of evidence, which we'll talk about in the future, about how almost all diseases are due to poor metabolic health. Almost all mental illness, according to Dr. Chris Palmer. We'll talk about him more soon. He's super exciting. No more anxiety, depression, OCD, or PTSD. It's possible. Almost all cancers come from metabolic dysfunction. That's been known since 1956, but conventional medicine still ignores it. So many cancers could be prevented and even treated with a non-toxic metabolic approach. And certainly the type 2 diabetes epidemic, type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's, heart disease, autoimmune issues, atherosclerosis, chronic pain, skin conditions, and all kinds of other wellness thieves are metabolic in origin. Metabolism is the common thread that weaves through almost all of what ails us as a modern society. A 2016 study of 8,721 adults across the U.S., done by researchers from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, found that only 1 in 8 adults in the United States are metabolically healthy. That means 88% of American adults are not. 88%. No wonder aging means decades of life spent in poor health, waiting in pharmacy lines, and progressively getting slower and weaker. It's completely normal to be metabolically unhealthy. Good thing you're not normal. And the first step to being abnormal is to get yourself into the 12% of people who are optimally metabolically healthy. Cool. But what does that even mean? Oh yeah, that's what we're supposed to be talking about. Metabolism is life. It's the process your body uses to convert inputs from your environment into the energy you need to stay alive. The main input there is obviously food, which can be immediately used for energy or stored for future use. Your metabolism is the set of cellular mechanisms, both physical and chemical, that create energy to power every cell in your body. If food is like your gasoline, your mitochondria are like your engine. Literally trillions of little engines cranking along, keeping you going. Metabolism takes place inside the mitochondria. Generally speaking, when we're talking about mitochondrial health and metabolic health, they're the same thing. Mitochondrial dysfunction is metabolic dysfunction. If your mitochondria are struggling, your cells can't get the energy they need to function optimally, which leads to a whole gamut of mental and physical conditions. The ones that are pretty common in this country, especially as we get older. Depending on how cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs we are, our body's main fuel for our tiny engines usually comes in the form of glucose. Unless, of course, you're crazy with a K for keto and you don't eat carbs with a C, which takes a lot of effort and planning. When we eat carbohydrates, our pancreas secretes insulin and some of the glucose is processed by mitochondria to make the flavor of energy our cells can actually use, called ATP. Extra glucose is stored in muscles as glycogen for the next time we need to hold our destroyer of the universe pose. I don't do yoga, but I just learned about that pose. And in our liver as glycogen for when we stop eating but still want to keep living. Extra glucose beyond that is converted into triglycerides and stored as fat. You probably know that there's more to it than this, and our bodies are awesome at using alternative energy sources, and there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. The most common cause of mitochondrial and therefore metabolic trouble is that the majority of us eat more carbohydrates than we need to run efficiently, so we have excess glucose that causes our body to release a higher amount of insulin, but then over time we get desensitized to that higher amount of insulin, and it takes even more insulin to get glucose out of our blood and into our cells where it can be metabolized, and then eventually even more insulin and more. The presence of insulin also prevents the breakdown of stored fat for energy production. In this super common, like 88% of people, metabolic state, we have tons of gas and tons of keys to unlock the cells to receiving glucose, that's the insulin, but we can't get the gas into our engines because we've lost sensitivity to the key that unlocks the cell. So now our cells are energy deficient and we can't do what we would normally do when our cells are low on glucose, which is to dine in, so to speak, by nabbing a little fat from our hips or thighs because the presence of insulin prevents that from happening. Insulin is a storage hormone. This is a problem, a metabolic problem. We're overfueled but under-energized. It doesn't feel good, and it will eventually kill us. Maybe not for 40 years, but someday we'll get dementia or cancer or diabetes or something. In addition to the energy efficiency problem, having insulin resistance also increases inflammation, oxidative stress, and glycation. Those are all chemically damaging to your cells, and that damage is metabolic in origin. Hey, I just wanted to quickly interrupt and say good for you for being here listening to a podcast about improving your biological age relative to your chronological age. Have you ever thought about slowing the biological aging of your skin? If you heard my episode 55 about senescent cells, then you know that the accumulation of these undead cells accelerates all of the problems of aging. Well, now there's a topical supplement you can put on your skin that reduces the accumulation of senescent cells in your skin. This reduces wrinkles, but also all other skin conditions caused by thinner, weaker, drier skin. It also reduces the formation of age spots and increases collagen and hyaluronic acid production within your skin. It's a peptide called OS01, and it's in a product called OneSkin. I use it every day on my face and neck, and I've noticed a big difference. I would say my skin is more moisturized, but that's not a good enough description because it's not like when you put moisturizer on, but your skin is still dry underneath. It's the exact opposite. The topical supplement isn't greasy at all, but my skin is plumper and healthier from the inside out. I'm a big fan. If OneSkin sounds like something you'd like to try, there's a link in the show notes to get you $20 off. All right, back to the episode. For most people, the biggest lever to pull, like imagine you have to stand way up on your tippy toes to grab it and then you pull it all the way down to the ground. It's a jumbo-sized lever. That lever is to eat the appropriate amount of carbohydrates. Have you ever seen Modern Times with Charlie Chaplin? It makes me think of that. Levers and cogs and wheels. I used to watch it with my dad when I was little. I don't think my kids have ever seen a silent movie. Maybe I'll have to find it and watch it with them. I haven't seen it in like forever, but I think it's still pretty top notch, especially for being 87 years old. Okay, so eating virtually no carbs whatsoever ever again might be appropriate for some people, like those who can completely get rid of their epilepsy or bipolar disorder or cancer or schizophrenia that way. But for most people, I think not staying in ketosis forever is a better play. It's great periodically, but when you're in ketosis for months or years, you actually become insulin resistant too, which is interesting. But the vast majority of people would be doing themselves a huge favor by eating fewer carbohydrates, especially simple, easy to break down ones like sugars and starches. This allows you to stay exquisitely sensitive to your own insulin and for your body to efficiently provide all of your cells with the energy they need to thrive, otherwise known as metabolic health. But our metabolism is affected by more than just food. Frankenfood or ultra-processed food throws a wrench in your metabolic machinery. The time of day that you eat matters. Late night eating and consistent snacking screw up your insulin responses. Stress affects your ability to produce and use energy. So too does sleep. When you're stressed or sleep deprived, your higher levels of cortisol and probably some other hormones too prevent you from burning fat for fuel. Being sedentary, even a sedentary exerciser, inhibits your ability to produce and use energy efficiently. Exercising hugely affects your metabolism by creating more demand for energy, which causes you to develop, out of necessity, more mitochondria per cell to give you a power up, which is awesome. And then environmental toxins also affect your mitochondrial health, which in turn affects your metabolism. So don't smoke cigarettes or huff paint thinner. Actually, there are a lot more things that you might not realize are sapping your mitochondrial health, like beauty products and food containers. It's not just about sniffing glue, but don't do that either. You've probably heard of metabolic syndrome before. It has a clear-cut definition of having 3 or more of the following indicators: a waistline of 35 inches or more for women, 40 inches for men, fasting glucose above 100 milligrams per deciliter, HDL cholesterol, the good one, less than 40 milligrams per deciliter, triglycerides above 150 milligrams per deciliter, and blood pressure of 130/85 or higher. If you have 3 or more of those things, you have metabolic syndrome. People with metabolic syndrome have a significantly increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, dementia, cancer, disability, chronic pain, and more. Their immune systems are usually compromised by chronic inflammation, and they have more negative effects from colds, flus, and COVID. One study done from 2011 to 2016 showed that 50% of Americans over age 60 have metabolic syndrome, and its incidence is on the rise among adolescents and young adults. If you or someone you love has metabolic syndrome, it is an urgent sign that you need to take steps to improve your mitochondrial and therefore metabolic health ASAP. It is serious. It's also figure-outable. If you work with a coach through a program that uses your willpower wisely to install habits that run on autopilot to close that gap between who you're capable of being and who you're actually being, and create a life on purpose where the things that you love to do and the things that are best for you become the same, then that dark cloud of impending worry will dissipate. I'd love to be that coach that walks you through that, because I know that the world will be a better place for my kids and their future kids if your mitochondria are at peak capacity 30 years from now. We need you. Improving your energy production machinery now will continue to pay dividends for decades, even once it becomes just an old habit that you never even have to think twice about. Our psychology affects our physiology, but our physiology also affects our psychology. There is tons of evidence about how stressing out your metabolic functioning negatively influences your mood in both the short and the long term. Anxiety and depression can make it more challenging to take ferocious control of your metabolism, but if you do the work to give your mitochondria the environment to work optimally, anxiety and depression tend to go away. We know the standardized definition of metabolic syndrome. So what's the standardized definition of metabolic health? Yeah, there isn't one. That's part of the problem with throwing around recommendations to people to get their metabolism in shape. No more confusion, you guys. You've got this. Next time you hear someone mention metabolic fitness in a vague politician, you deserve to feel stupid if you don't understand me, but I can't clearly define what I'm talking about myself way, you won't have to wonder what they're talking about. You'll know, maybe even better than they do. that it's all about your mitochondria, producing energy efficiently and effectively without gumming up the works or causing noxious byproducts along the way. Metabolic health is not just about body weight. Having an excess of body fat could be a sign that your mitochondria are struggling, especially if it's visceral fat that's crammed in around your organs. But it is possible to have a little extra subcutaneous fat and have your engines running without an issue. It's also completely possible to be at a normal weight and have serious metabolic issues. The most commonly cited markers for a well-functioning metabolism are optimal blood sugar levels, triglycerides, HDL, blood pressure, and waist circumference. Sound familiar? There are specific lab levels you could take a look at, and I'd be happy to let you know what those are. Send me a message. But beyond just not having metabolic syndrome, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cancer, or cardiovascular disease, if you are metabolically fit, you have sustained energy all day long. No afternoon slump or chronic fatigue. You have sharp memory and recall, a stable mood, clear skin, no fertility or sexual problems, a high-functioning immune system, ability to sleep well at night, exercise endurance, ability to build muscle, lose fat, or maintain your weight, whichever your goal is. Basically, your health now and 10, 20, 30, 40, or more years from now depends on how metabolically fit you are right now. Part of being metabolically fit and efficiently using fuel to create abundant energy and not cause disease along the way has to do with your ability to switch between fuel sources. You want to be a hybrid. Electric vehicles are cool and everything. My husband and I have been test driving them here and there for the past year, trying to just pick which one we're going to get. And our electrician told us that since the power comes into our house on the opposite side from our garage, it's going to be a huge pain to get a 240 volt outlet installed there. We're still going to do it. And the first road trip we take will have to be pretty well planned out so we don't run out of charge along the way. The world is very much set up for people who fuel their cars with gas. Whether you drive or aspire to drive a traditional car or an EV, if carbs are like gas to your body and electricity is like fats, you don't want to be either, unless you have a select few medical conditions that I mentioned earlier. You want to be a hybrid. You were designed to be able to effortlessly switch between burning carbs and burning fat for fuel. Your body was factory installed with those settings. But guess what? Most of us can't effortlessly make that switch. Because of the way most everyone eats, almost everyone is stuck in carb burn all the time. That's why people get hangry or debilitatingly fatigued if they don't eat for a little while, or they get keto flu if they try to cut carbs. But if you have high-functioning mitochondria, a high mitochondrial density, and you're sensitive to insulin, you can effortlessly switch from carb burn to fat burn whenever your carb stores run out. This is all part of a longer discussion, but if you consistently eat in a way that teaches your body to burn carbs when they're available and easily burn fats when they're not, you'll have better long-term health outcomes and it will be easier to get and maintain the body weight you desire. Because when you're in carb burn all the time, as almost everybody is, your insulin levels never get low enough to allow for fat burn, and your body freaks out and you start getting hypoglycemia symptoms if you haven't eaten for a while. Whereas if you're keto all the time and never have any carbs, if you do go back to eating some carbs, your body freaks out and squirrels them away as fat immediately because it hasn't had the chance to do that for so long. You want to be able to burn fat as often as desired without your body freaking out, and be able to eat carbs sometimes and have your body casually partition them into muscles for physical power instead of freaking out and storing fat like a hoarder at a clearance sale. Let me know if you want to hear more about this stuff in the future. There are some cool things you can do to fuel your workouts for optimal performance and muscle building while still allowing fat burn throughout the day, especially when you're resting. I've been using Lumen to measure my respiratory exchange rate for the past 4 months, and it's been interesting to get that real-time feedback from my lifestyle choices. If you haven't heard of it before, it's like this little breathalyzer thing that tells you whether you're burning carbs or fat, and you can measure as many times as you want to throughout the day. So you can see in the moment what you're metabolizing when you sleep well versus when you don't. That's been super interesting. Or when you exercise a certain way, and certainly based on what you eat and when. That's been the biggest learning for me so far, the timing of carbs. It's changed the way I think about and do things. Let me know if you want to know more about Lumen. I'd be happy to give you an honest and more in-depth review. If you've heard about it before and have been thinking about trying it to either increase your exercise performance or optimize your body fat or improve your long-term metabolic flexibility, there's a link in the show notes that will get the first few people who click it $100 off. I don't get anything out of it if you use it. It's just a gift to you and it's there if you want it. There are tons of other things that affect our ability to create energy from inputs. Environmental toxins absolutely affect our metabolism, so do our vitamin levels and availability of minerals. Our hormones beyond just insulin play a role. Sleep very much affects our metabolic processes, and so does stress. Movement, be it exercise or the potentially more important, just changing of positions throughout the day, creates demand for energy and affects metabolic processes. One of the biggest factors in changing your food to energy is the part that your gut buddies play. Who lives in your microbiome heavily influences how your food is broken down and converted into energy. Metabolism is a complicated process, but I hope you're not unclear about what people are talking about anymore when they say everything is a metabolic disease or metabolically related. Your metabolism is your ability to take inputs from the environment and change those into energy to fuel your cellular processes and your experience of life. It's heavily influenced by what you eat and how much and when, but also by available hormones and micronutrients and energy demand. When our mitochondria are inefficient and have to work harder due to suboptimal inputs, they produce more exhaust, so to speak, and everything else starts to get gummed up and damaged. Metabolism isn't just about body appearance or body weight. That's not even in the top 10 reasons to be metabolically healthy. It's about having the energy you want to do the things you want to do now and 30 years from now. It's a way to have a better life today and tomorrow and in your 90s. Most common diseases of aging are metabolic in nature and take decades to escalate to the point of being diagnosable. If you help your mitochondria be healthy and efficient now, you can sidestep most of those common diseases of aging and spend the energy that most people are going to spend worrying about medical complications and what insurance will or won't cover, worrying about how to scale your business or recruit more volunteers to your cause or campaign for city council or whatever it is that you want to do to make this world a better place. Let me know if you want to know more about how to make sure your metabolism is efficient. I'd be happy to talk about it with you personally or on the podcast. Like most things, having immediate feedback is what helps you improve your results the best. It's true with bowling and learning how to drive and improv comedy and your metabolic health. What's absolutely best for you will be different than what's best for somebody else, but a continuous glucose monitor is probably the best tool. I have wanted one for a while now, but haven't taken the leap yet. A Lumen device to measure your respiratory exchange rate is also a good option, and even just tracking habits and behaviors and desired outcomes like energy on a scale of 1 to 10 is valuable information because it's all about making connections. Making connections helps me see that if I didn't sleep well for whatever reason, my Lumen shows me the next morning that I am not in fat burn mode. It's very clear. If I get up out of my chair every 20 minutes and get more than 8,000 steps a day, I can eat more carbs in a day and still burn fat. Eating carbs at dinner keeps me out of fat burn mode the next morning. You don't want a lot of insulin at night. At first blush, it can seem kind of disappointing, but data is your friend because it gives you the power to choose. When you know better, you can do better. When you do better, the consequences will pay dividends for decades to come. All health, including metabolic health, is on a continuum. It's not an either or, and you can make little changes consistently that will slide you up or down a notch on that continuum. You are in control of your future. You are awesome. Thank you for your attention today and for caring about your metabolic health. Next week, we're going to talk about the big get. Until then, help your cellular power plants run efficiently and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.